I'm Nicole Kelly. I'm a recovered alcoholic. And, thank you to God, these 12 steps, and really good sponsorship. I have been sober since January 23rd, 1999. And it really is a blessing to be here. When I first moved to Texas, I knew Sheila, so I followed her around. And this was my home group. I loved this group. They welcomed me in. They made me feel part of. They gave me a job right away. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm just getting my feet wet here in Texas. They were like, no, you need a job. But it was really important, and I loved this group, and they really made me a part of Texas, because I can promise you that Texas AA was very different from what I was used to. And so it was a little bit awkward, and it was difficult for me to kind of adjust. And one of the funny things about being new in a new area is that when you're brand new and everybody's like, oh, you're new, let's help you, what do you need? But when you're just new to an area, but you've been around for a while, they're like, oh, you'll figure it out, you're good. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, like you know what I mean, like I still need help. And so I just wanted to say that if you're new or you're thinking about a group, these people here, they are amazing. I actually heard people call it the, oh, you're going to that get well group. And I thought that was hysterical, because isn't that what you want? Right? Don't you want to get well? So why wouldn't you want to come around to people that want to get well? Now that seems crazy. You're new, you just came in. I didn't want to get well when I was new. I would have been part of that group. But where I came from, again, and it tells us to tell our story in a general way. What it was like, what happened, and where we are today. And so, where I came from, my parents were children having children. They were hippies. And, and so it was an interesting lifestyle. My father had, this is like echoing on me. Now it's stuck on me. All right, we're gonna do that. My father had 3 friends. They were the town drunk, the town drug dealer, and the pedophile. And so that was my childhood, and I'm not here to give everybody details, because you don't need them. They're mine. They're for me and my sponsor, they're for me and the girls I work with. But what I learned from that was how to drink at a really young age. I knew the bar scene. I knew what it was like. I knew where to sit, where to be, who to be with, who not to be with. I knew how to weigh. I knew how to measure. I knew how to distribute. I knew how to hide. And I knew I didn't know how to hide well enough. And, so, drinking was a big part of my childhood. I never had a real childhood. My dad would give me a 6-pack of pony bears. They were supposed to be shared with my brother. I didn't share well even then. So I had my own little 6-pack of pony bears. And again, if you're too young to know what those are, it's like the little mini sodas they sell today. And, and I would be a part of fishbowling the Volkswagen Bug and just, running wild. By the time I was, 11, my mother had, my brother and I, but she also had her nephew, because my aunt had better things to do than raise a child. So she had 3 kids. And by the time I was 11, she had had enough of us. She lined us up. She told us how much she disliked us and that she was going to work nights. And I was okay with that. I know it sounds crazy, and I have my own children, and I was sober for them to be at these pivotal ages that I was at these times, and I really got to see and feel the devastation of what those ages really are. But at 11 years old, I was running the neighborhood wild. I had several incidences with getting picked up by the cops and brought home. I had several instances of getting in trouble at school. I thought it was, kind of funny to dress up for my 4th grade parade as a hooker. So if that gives you any idea of the mentality that I'm bringing to the table at that age, at that point in my life. I had already had a couple of, incidences where I got so drunk that I passed out and blacked out, and I was passed out and vomiting and asphyxiating on my own, vomit, and my mother just pushed me into the pile and said, "I can't believe you did this while your grandmother was still here." Not that I was drunk, not that I was asphyxiating, none of those things. The issue was that I embarrassed her. And so this is just how I ran. I had a couple of suicide attempts, and so I think that, like when you look at that stuff and you go, like, oh well, no wonder, right? But the funny part about it is I wasn't an only child. Remember that. Dysfunction, absolutely 100%. But I was the only one that chased a drink. I was the only one that chased a drug. So it's not about my alcoholism being because of all of that trauma and drama. It just exacerbated it. By the time I was 15, I was pregnant with my own child. I had taken a hostage, not just my child, but my man. He was a hostage. I thought that dating was hostage situations. God love him. He'll be here later. He had a mohawk. He had a leather jacket. He wore ripped up jeans. He wore a red and a black Converse. I don't know why. But he sold drugs for a living. He was just my match in heaven. Do you remember in your high school and you're coming off the bus and they had the parking lot for all the cool kids that actually had a license? Here he was strutting right in front of the bus. And I was like, ooh. I looked at my best friend, who is that? And she was like, that's who we get our acid from. And I was like, oh, what more do you need in a man? So we started our lovely journey together. And, and it is funny. There were a lot of funny stories, and there were a lot of things that happened. And the truth is that every drink I took, somebody paid a price. Whether it was me or it was my family, whether it was somebody paid a price, I had this beautiful little child, and, Mark and I had this, really intelligent discussion like you all do when you're, in the midst of your disease. And the drugs were the problem, drinking was not. So therefore, we're not going to do drugs anymore. We're only going to drink. And there'll be no problems, right? Drinking is not a problem. Who can't control drinking? And as far as he was concerned, he only drank beer pretty much. So, nobody has a problem drinking beer, right? And, so, things go on, but, as you live that way, life happens, right? And things happen. And it got uglier and uglier. And so, we're on again, off again. We're a hot mess. And then we decide that if we're going to fix our problems again, we're going to get married. Because again, marriage is the solution now, right? Never once was the thought, let's not drink. Never once was the thought, let's not behave this way. It was always external solution to an internal condition. And so we get married, and we're at the church, and he's standing up there and he's weaving and he's got a fifth in his pocket, and my son is bringing down the ring bearer, and I think at that point I was 4 months pregnant with our second child, which I hate to be honest about, but it didn't stop me from drinking because I was only 4 months pregnant, so therefore I wasn't really showing, so therefore I could still drink, right? This is the kind of logic that I bring to the table. And we get married, and we leave the church in separate limos. So that pretty much tells you where our marriage was going, right? We got thrown out of our own reception. And that's where we began our marriage. Shockingly enough, our marriage lasted 3 years. And during those 3 years, there was, chaos, absolute chaos. I would go out to have a drink with my girlfriends, and I wouldn't come home. I would drop my kids off on Friday with my parents and show back up on Tuesday. I would go Christmas shopping, and then at 2 in the morning with no Christmas presents, I would be crawling up the stairs, and my husband standing at the door in his work uniform waiting to go to work. And I'm literally crawling up the stairs trying to come in the house. And so, but what's funny is you can always find, until the end, right? You can always find someone that's worse than you, right? And so, my friend base is getting lower and lower, right? Because as I get worse, I need worse people around me, right? Because there's no way that I can be better than unless you're worse than me. And so, my husband is, in my opinion, worse than me because he didn't shower every day. And, he would pass out in the chair, and he took a beer in the shower with him, right? Like, I didn't do that. So I was better than him, right? And, and again, things happened, and our relationship deteriorated, and things got to be where they were. And he came home one night, and I had been home, and things happened like they always do, and I told him he had to leave, and he packed a bag with beer in it and a couple of pairs of pants, and, he threw the beer at me, and I'm like, look, there's your life rolling around on the floor. And what's funny is, like, how clearly we can see somebody else's problem, right? And so the next day, he shows back up, and he's got his spray can, and he reeks of booze, and he's telling me how he's changed. And there was a moment, I had a moment, and I'm on the other side of the table from him, and he's walking, and we're like doing that, that game, you know what I mean, where I'm keeping a table between us. And I have a moment, one clear moment, that I realize that I'm afraid of this man. And I promise you, that is not something that is acceptable to me. Fear is not something that you acknowledge. My dad beat that out of me way, way long ago. You never showed fear. Never. And I was afraid of him. And I looked at him, and I'm like, you're nothing but a drunk. And I'm not doing this anymore. And he walked out the door, and he took his 30 rack, and he seatbelted it in the car, and off he went. And and he ended up getting sober, and that's his story, and I'll let him tell his story. But that was it for him, right? Like, he got sober, he went to AA, and I don't know what he heard, or how he heard it, what he did, but he went, and I was justified because I did not have a problem. He was my problem, and we were going to be good. But you know what happens when you take a girl like me, and that little line in the sand that you had been judging yourself by, and you take that out? There's no line anymore. All bets are off, right? And I was off and running. And unfortunately, for the next 2 years, if there was a line that I could cross, if there was a moral that I could burn and put in a cupboard, I did. If there was damage I could do, I did. The book talks about that. Demoralized, incomprehensible demoralization. That's how I spent my next 2 years. Again, you don't need all my stories and my details, because I know you have your own. I know you do. Because it isn't about those externals. It's not about what I did. It's about what I felt. It's about the fact that I couldn't look myself in the eye. I couldn't look you in the eye. I didn't want to drink anymore. I didn't want to do what I was doing. I didn't want to say what I was saying, and I couldn't not do it. I had those days where I sat on my kitchen floor in tears. I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm not doing this again. And I lost that battle every single time. Every time. And, I drank round the clock. I would have lied and told you I didn't. I didn't think I did, but I did. I had the shakes at night, and so I would drink NyQuil right out of the bottle. Everybody kept a bottle of NyQuil on the nightstand, right? That's pretty normal. I had a bottle of Bailey's, and I had a bottle of, either Jameson or Jack Daniels. I don't know why Jack, but I kind of liked it. And I would put that in my coffee because, again, I really believe that Bailey's was not alcohol. It was Irish cream, and I'm an Irish girl. And, and so I would drink my coffee, at least I would brush my teeth, and I would, drink my Listerine, which is gross. And then I would drink my way through day, and when I couldn't drink, I had a litany of prescriptions. Now again, I am not here to tell anybody what you can and can't do with medication. That is not my business. But I am going to tell you that I have a very colorful medical chart that I misused the hell out of. I went to a lot of different doctors, I got a lot of different prescriptions, and again, it's not that what they based my diagnoses off wasn't factual, it was just grossly exaggerated. And when they asked me, like how much I was drinking, not at all. When they asked me about what I was doing, I was very quick to point fingers at people, places, and things. I used my childhood, I used my marriage, I used whatever I could to get what I needed. And again, I never had a prescription that said crush and snort. I never had one that said take by the handful. I had plenty that said take as needed, and I was as needed a lot. A lot. And so as my drinking progressed, and again, it doesn't make me you do you. I'm not here to criticize, I'm not the AA police, but it doesn't make me an alcoholic and anything. I am an alcoholic that when alcohol wasn't working, I substituted the shit out of whatever I needed. Because the truth is that I could not sit still with me, and I needed to get out of that. And whatever that looked like, I was on board with. So I'm going on this downhill spiral really, really fast. And my ex-husband he's gotten sober, right? And like he had really long curly hair at this point. He looked like Slash out of Guns N' Roses, and I can find a picture, anybody wants one. And he cut his hair off, right? He cleaned up. He was going to meetings. He was dating, and I was like, what? That can't happen. And the biggest thing for me, though, was these children that were afraid of their father were now waiting by the door to go with their father. They were excited. They wanted to stay with him. They wanted to live with him. This man can't cook to save his life. He's not big on cleaning, right? But he was a dad. He was there. He took him bike riding, took him to the park. He showed up for events. They wanted to be with their father. And what was really sad was, in this 2-year window, my children were now afraid of me. And again, none of those things are said with any kind of pride or anything. They're just facts. And the truth is that if I can't get real about my own facts, I can't get sober. If I let myself off the hook, if I started to try to downplay how I lived, that's where I get in trouble. And so, he's gotten sober. He's been, he's worked these steps. He's very kindly offered to take me to meetings. He's very kindly, like giving me a big book, which, I had very lovely words to say about. And, I had started proceedings to get divorced. And, what's funny is, like, there's no coincidences, right? My divorce attorney, I picked him out of the yellow pages. That bastard was in AA. He had his sober cup on the thing, and he's listening to me, and he's like, do you think maybe you should go to meetings? And I'm like, where the hell do these people come from? Right? Like, I got a therapist telling me I need to go. I got my freaking divorce attorney telling me I need to go. My ex-husband's telling me I need to go. And I'm like, you people are all insane. Right? Like, I'm so good. I got it all together. And, but, inevitably comes that day, right? That day when you don't got it together and you do something, say something that just, you hit your knees and you're just done, right? And so I have one of those moments, and I think it's a great idea after drinking to swing on by my ex-husband's house and lay out the kind of girl I've been being for the last 2 years. I don't recommend this. I really don't. I had gone to a couple of AA meetings. I really wanted nothing to do with them. I had gone to a couple of Al-Anon meetings. I wanted nothing to do with them. I read your steps off the wall. Thought that was about all I needed to do. Definitely not going to talk to a woman. And, You know, you were way too well lit, and I really was not interested. And so I swing by my ex's house, and I dump a bunch of stuff on him that, you know, no man needs to know about his ex-wife or is the mother of his children. And this is, what's important is the program at work in somebody, right? Faith, anybody can show up, right? The big book, anybody can read it, right? But can you demonstrate it? Can you be it? And not can you be it when it's good and when it's easy, but can you be it when it's tough? When you're sitting across from your ex, who you're actively logging to take custody of children, right? Who has done nothing but destroy your world for the past 2 years. You know, I'm talking restraining orders, I'm talking taking the kids, going after his money, anything I could do to upset the apple cart and prove that he couldn't stay sober and that he wasn't what he was showing. I did. I made his first 2 years of sobriety as painful and as difficult as you could ever imagine. And he said to me that I didn't have to be that way. And that, you know, if I wanted to, I could get well. And if I was interested, that he could get me a phone number. Now again, I'm insulted by this, a phone number. What the hell's a phone number going to do for me? But you know what? It wasn't his place to sponsor me. It wasn't his place to be that for me. But it was his place to put that hand of AA out to me. And he gave me a phone number. And I left there, and I really tried to roll my truck. I mean, I was the girl that took handfuls of pills with a bottle of vodka and said, please don't let me wake up. I forgot that I still had custody of my kids, and if I succeeded in that absolute selfishness, my children would have woke up to find their mother dead. And it never crossed my mind once. Never once did I think of them. I thought of me and my pain. You know, I bought a vehicle that had really bad safety ratings. And again, didn't cross my mind that I was putting my kids in that. What I crossed my mind was that I was in pain and I wanted a way out. Because that's how I was living my life. So it's not about how much I drank, or what happened when I drank. It was about the fact that that's what I was living with, and that's what I was trying to drown with drinking. That's the pain I was in, because the worse my behavior got, the worse I felt, the more I needed to drink. The more I drank, the worse my behavior got, the worse I felt, the more I drank, right? I mean, this is that merry-go-round, that vicious cycle. That's what I'm living in. That's what I'm looking to escape. That's what I'm looking to get out from under. And I get a phone number. Really? In a book. Really? But pain is a fabulous motivator. And so I called this crazy lady. And, you know, I left her a message, you know, because again, this is back in the 90s, and, you know, people had real phones on the wall and answering machines, you know, that you had to hit a button with a cassette tape. And I left her a message thinking I had it all together and that, you know what I mean, I was good. And she called me back like 30 minutes later asking if she needed to call the police or an ambulance. So again, right, like we think we're good, right? We're stumbling around thinking we're good, and other people are hearing and seeing our pain. And you know, and we talked, and, you know, and it's funny, and she asked me about, you know, going to meetings, and I told her why I couldn't get to a meeting and why I was so busy and my life was so fabulous and I didn't really need to do that. And, you know, and then, you know, she had me get a newspaper out, which I thought was a crazy thing, right? Like a newspaper, anonymous in the newspaper, right? But again, I know nobody gets newspapers anymore, but they were a real thing then. And, you know, I'm finding meetings all over and I was amazed, right? Because I knew where every bar was. I knew every package store. And again, you guys have liquor stores, but you also can sell beer and wine and, like, you know, everywhere. We didn't have that. We had what were called packies, right? Package stores. And it was the only place you got any kind of liquor, whether it was beer, wine, booze, whatever, it didn't matter. That was the only place. And back in the day, they were closed on Sundays, so you can imagine how frantic Saturdays were. Right? But, you know, so I knew where all of these places were. As a matter of fact, you know, because again, I used to write real checks, right? Like I'm writing a check for my booze, right? Like how twisted am I, right? But they sent me Christmas cards, so I had arrived. I guess that's kind of frowned upon. You know, when a package store is actually giving you a Christmas card, that's frowned upon. But, so I knew where all these places were, but I was shocked at how many AA meetings were right around where I lived. I really couldn't even believe it. But then again, we were talking, it's like a Sunday morning, right? And I'm telling her I can't get to one until Thursday because I am way too busy for sobriety. And, and the truth was, I was just afraid. I was afraid to go. I was afraid to stop. I was afraid of what was going to happen. And she talked to me about being a woman of honor and dignity. She talked about having grace. And I laughed, because I'm like, you can't take a girl like me. You can't be where I've been. You can't do what I've done and have those things. I'm sorry. Those are for nice people. I'm not a nice people. And she laughed at me, which made me mad. And she said that, that I was wrong and that those were the things. Those things were what were going to make me uniquely qualified to be of assistance to somebody else. And I had no idea what she was talking about. But, I was in just enough pain. You know what I mean? That just enough pain where I'm just a little bit open, right? And so, I actually had called my ex-husband because I'm not going to go to a meeting by myself. And I asked him to take me to a meeting, and again, God is good, right? He was gracious. He said, I'll get back to you. And I'm like, what do you mean? You need permission? He was like, I most certainly do. And he called his sponsor and, to take me to a meeting. And so I got drunk and went to his house to go to an AA meeting. Not productive, don't, recommend, but I showed up and he took me to the meeting. And again, we have basements in Massachusetts. And so Al-Anon's in the basement, AA's up here. And I'm just, by this point, I'm so full of myself already, right? Because it's amazing what, a couple of bottles of beer will do for you, right? I'm good. I feel good. I can breathe. I don't need this now. And so I said, all right, my problem is you. I'm going to Al-Anon. And God loved the man because he just said, wherever you can get help, right? I mean, he didn't ditch me, he didn't leave me, he didn't yell at me, you know what I mean? And again, I need to reinforce how much he did not like me. Justifiably so. And he was able to do that. One alcoholic helping another. Right? It's just amazing. And I can tell you that that's not where I came from. That's not what I knew. That's not where I was from. And it wasn't even like our marriage that first go round, So it was different. And I could see it was different and I could hear it was different. But I went to Al-Anon. And they were fabulous in there. It was in the 90s, and adult children of alcoholics was like really big, and so people were like double winners. They were in AA, they were in adult children, they were in Al-Anon. Everybody was like mix and matching programs, and I just kept identifying and like going to these double winners. And I just thought it was because I wanted to be, better than, right? So they were better than, so I wanted to be in that better than category. But really what it was is I was identifying with my people. I just didn't know it. Because I'd be sitting in an Al-Anon meeting and there'd be like these ladies and they'd be talking about their husbands come home and it's just like that they get the ice starts clinking in the glass and it gets fear and it gets anxiety, and I'm looking at them going, that's when I can breathe. Right? Like, because they're on the other side of the street and they're talking about what they know is going to happen once that person starts drinking, right? Once the alcohol goes in the system, they know what it's going to set up, right? And so they're feeling that. They're living that. And I'm over here going, that's when it gets good, right? Like, we're not the same. And so these lovely people in Al-Anon, and I think Al-Anon is a fabulous program. I can't say enough about it. I really, truly do. But they kept saying to me, we recommend you go to AA at least 3 days a week to identify only, just so you know what it's like to be on the other side. And I'm like, 3 days a week? You don't think that's excessive? They're like, not for you. And at this point I kind of heard enough to stop drinking and to try it out, you know what I mean? And I'm really uncomfortable. Really, really uncomfortable, right? Because I am trying to treat my disease by just not drinking and holding my breath, right? I'm sitting in your seat, I'm reading your steps off the wall, I'm not being sponsored, I'm reading your literature just enough so I can slogan my way right out of wherever I need to be. And and I'm going to AA and I'm realizing like that's probably where I need to be. And Al-Anon, as great as they were, it wasn't enough for me, right? So I'm I'm in AA, and I'm coming in late, and I'm leaving early, and I'm sitting in the back, and I'm waiting for the miracle to hit me, and I'm ready to throat punch the next person that tells me their gratitude. And I'm about 60 days sober, and I've had enough. I've had enough, I promise you. Sobriety had become so freaking painful that I could not remember the pain of drinking. Because if this was sobriety, I had had enough. You know, the book talks about restless, irritable, and discontent. Well, restless, I couldn't sit still. I couldn't stop the racing of my mind, right? Like, I mean, I'm having a hot mess. Like, I'm not coming in here with a winning streak. I don't know anybody that has, but you know what I mean? I'm paying Discover with MasterCard with Visa. You know what I mean? I'm parking my car in the backyard so they can't repossess it. You know, on my 4th job, it's March, and you know what I mean? Like, I'm a mess. My life is a mess, and I you know, I'm very restless, and I'm I think that if I could just have this, it would be good. If I could just, you know, if I had my kids better, then it would be good. If I didn't have my kids at all, I'd be good. If I had this job, if I had that job, if there was more money, right? And I mean, again, I'm talking like an auctioneer, and it's going faster and faster, and I can't even breathe, right? And that's that discontent, right? Like, I need something else, right? If it was just something else, then I'd be okay. And then irritable, well, you talked, I wanted to run you over. You know, I was a violent little girl, and yeah, people kind of, they kept me at arm's length, right? I was not being in the, you know, the social hand-holding circle. They were like, yeah, we'll let the crazy girl sit over on the side. But about 60 days in, and I don't know about you, but I'm at my cap. I'm done. I'm leaving. Your AA crap don't work. Your meetings are shit. I've had enough. I've taken what I like and leaving the rest, right? So like, I've taken the money out of the basket. I've drank your coffee. I've flirted with your men, and I've left the rest. You know, the sponsorship, the book, the steps, you know what I mean? Like any of that. I don't want any of that. But I'm leaving, and I'm going to go get drunk, or I'm going to the doctor's and I'm getting a new prescription, because if I have to sit in this skin for one more second with nothing, someone's not going to make it. And I really didn't care if it was me or you. And that's just the truth. And I had a brave-ass woman get between me and the door, and she asked me 2 questions. 2 questions that I can tell you pissed me off. And that's what Christy was talking about. Her job was to get in my way and be honest and hold a mirror up. It wasn't to be my best friend. It wasn't to be nice and fluffy and soft and you know, hold me and cuddle me until I died in her lap. That was not her job. So she asked me the first question, which she asked me, you even an alcoholic? And I am highly offended by this, because I'm in your stupid meeting. What do you think? But the truth is that she said, well, what does that mean to you to be an alcoholic? And I'm like, look, I drink too much and I get in trouble, right? I mean, that's it. That's what. And she says, well, you know what I mean? Like, if that's all it is, then, you know, just don't drink. Really, real fun. And she said, no, that's not what it means to be an alcoholic. She says, first of all, you know what I mean? Step 1 is a 2-pot proposition, right? And so she says, let me ask you a couple of questions. What happens when you drink? Right? And I'm like, I get in trouble. She's like, no. What happens when you drink? Can you start and stop abruptly with cuffs? Can you start and stop? Can you moderate? I said, moderate? What the hell does that word even mean? Right? It is on. It is all or nothing. I have never drank something with a little umbrella in it. You know what I mean? I never, you know what I mean? I was not the type of girl that just had one drink, you know what I mean? Like, I always ordered more than one, and I was the 12-year-old kid walking around with a gallon of 151, right? Like, moderate is not a word I use. But she said, you know, so it's not about, like, you know, drinking and getting in trouble. There are plenty of people that happens to. She says, but what happens when you drink? Can you start and stop? Can you start and stop abruptly? Can you stop and moderate? Can you stop and stay stopped? And I'm thinking to myself, no, because I'm on my way out the door to get some, right? Like, no, I can't stay stopped. That's my whole problem. I can't stay stopped. And then she said, so, what happens when you don't drink? And I'm looking at her and she's like, do you think about drinking? Do you think about not drinking?
Do you think about how much you can drink? Do you think about when you can drink? Do you think about when you'll be able to drink again, how much you're going to be able to do? Can you get away with it? Can you get away with it, right? And I'm like, oh my God, like this lady is like, she's in my head. How did she get there? Right? And then she asked me the second question that was really offensive, was, how long do you want to attend a 12-step program and not do the 12 steps? And you know what? That's an offensive question to a girl like me, because I'm doing your steps. I'm reading, well, not this book, because this was way too big and way too, ugh. The 12 and 12. Did you know this great book, right? I'm not here to disparage it, but there's no directions in there. They're just essays written to enhance and read the forward. Essays written to broaden and deepen your understanding of the steps. There's not directions. It's just to kind of like hook you in and want to do them, right? But I read the steps off the wall. I went to meetings and I ran my mouth like I knew what I was talking about. Like I said, I knew enough to be dangerous, right? But I had never actually done anything. I never followed a direction, not one. Definitely not steps 1, 2, or 3. I hadn't done any of them. All I had done was stop drinking and tried to hold my breath and hold my seat. And, and so, she asked me if I, what I was, this is the other one, willing to do, right? Did you know that willingness means prompted to act? I sure as hell didn't. I said I was willing to do anything. And she said, really? Because if you're willing, then you're going to do prompted to act, and you're going to take some action. You're not going to talk about it. You're not going to wish about it. You're not going to want about it. You're going to do it. And I was like, we are not going to be friends. And again, we are people who normally would not mix. And, and the truth is that this woman was nothing I wanted to be at 26 years old. She knitted in the meeting. She wore penny loafers. She was a happy housewife. I was not. I looked like Sluts Are Us. I swore in between syllables, and I, had morals to match, and so I didn't think this woman had anything to offer me. But again, I started to do this to prove that it wouldn't work. I had nothing else to lose, right? I mean, my life was shit, and I had nothing. And so she says, what do you have to lose, right? Like, I mean, worst case scenario, she's like, by all means, you're already heading back out the door. Go back and keep drinking. If you're not done, there's the door, go. And I'm like, you can't throw me out of AA. And she said, I'm not throwing you out of AA. I'm telling you that if you don't want to be here, why are you here? Why? If you think it's so good out there, then go do it. So I started the steps. I started the steps to prove they wouldn't work and to be mostly arrogant. We sat together. Now again, I had to read the book myself, but then we would sit together and she would read it with me chapter by chapter, and we would go through it, and she would tell me her story as it related to what we were reading. And so by doing that, it made the information alive and well. It made the information relevant. And what was amazing to me was that we started with the forewords, and I was like, who the hell reads that crap? And there was a tremendous amount of information in there that was really, really important, and it caught my attention, and it caught my interest. And then we read the doctor's opinion, and again, we're not even at page 1 yet, you know what I mean? But the doctor's opinion was so important to me. And you read the promises, and everybody gets so hung up on those 9-step promises. They're extravagant, we think not. Hell yeah, they are when you're brand new. That shit is unattainable. But the doctor's opinion had a promise that we could recreate our lives. And I don't know about you, but like I said, I came in not on a winning streak. I was losing custody of my kids. My marriage was already over. My family, who sucked ass, they weren't even talking to me. You know what I mean? I was losing jobs. I had no money. I had no nothing. My friend base, if you weren't fresh out of jail, we probably weren't talking. And, and so life was dark. It was really, really dark. And the doctor's opinion tells me that I can recreate my life. And that was huge to me. It was huge. And I held on to that. That was the promise that got me moving. But step one, we had to do we'd go through steps, all the steps. And step one is a two-part proposition. And I don't know about you, but I always read that little hyphen as an and. I'm powerless over alcohol and my life became unmanageable. So again, when I was reading it that way, I am trying to, think about my unmanageability as a direct relation to when I drank and got in trouble. But the truth is, it's a hyphen. It's a two-part proposition, right? So the first part is I'm powerless over alcohol. And so, yes, that's like an analogy, right? When I drink, I can't stop, so just don't drink. That's that first part. Well, I can hold my breath about 60 days. I've just proved this to myself, right? How long can you hold your breath? I don't know. Everybody's different, right? But so for me, I can hold my breath about 60 days, and I need relief. And so that's where that second part comes in. That's that unmanageability. Page 52 in our book talks about the bedevilments, right? Like problems with personal relationships, trouble making a living. It talks about being full of fear and depression and uselessness and all these types of things. And, and that's really that unmanageability. And believe you me, I was living it alive and well. I was no pink cloud in my first year of sobriety. I didn't have it. If you have it, great, write it out, use it, bless ya. Not my experience. And, but I had to take a look at some of that unmanageability. And then, step two was kind of really cool because I came in here with a whole mess of craziness, you know what I mean? Like my grandfather was a Jehovah, my grandmother was a Protestant, my other family was Irish Catholic, my parents were hippies and they believed in, free love and sex. And so, I didn't know my head was spinning. So if we were talking religion, man, I was a mess. It wasn't religion. It was just spirituality, right? It was just about a faith. And step two was a real simple question. She said, do you believe? And I said, hell no. And she said, okay, that's cool. Are you willing to believe? And I'm like, what does that mean? She says, to act as if, to take some action and allow the opportunity for that to come true. I said, well, I can do that. She said, awesome. Let's do step three. We're going to get on our knees and pray. We were in a Dunkin' Donuts coffee shop, people. I was like, in public? Again, let's look at my drinking, right? I ran over my mailbox, I broke into my own home, climbed in and out of windows, right? Like I had a revolving door and that did not bother me. But you want me to pray in public? We need to rethink this AA thing. But she reminded me, she said, you were willing to do anything. What does anything look like for you? And I was like, Dad, which? I thought she wasn't nice. What I know today is that she had a real firm grasp on what this program was, and that she loved me and this program enough to give me the opportunity to get sober, find God, and to have a life worth living. But in that moment, I had plenty to say about her. And then she said, and so we get up and I'm like, oh good, now I get to have a rest and I'm going to take a break and because that's enough. And she says, no, it says we're going to launch into vigorous action. I said, what the hell are you talking about? And we started my fourth step. And again, you know what I mean? Like I've the first part of that fourth step, breaking down resentment. Who am I mad at? Oh boy, did I have a good time. Well, let me tell you who I'm mad at. This is what they did to me. And then I'm going to look at what it affects. And I'm not too happy about that. But you know what? It's okay. You know why? Because now you know why I'm a victim. Now you know why I'm hurt. Because look at my self-esteem, my security, my ambitions, all of these things have been affected. Oh, woe is me. That's so tough. I thought, hey, it was going to be easy. And she says, all right, we're going to flip the page and we're going to look at you. Because I was like, where do I put me on my resentment list? Because I'm so upset with me. And she says, oh, don't worry, you get a whole page. Don't you worry, you get a whole page with everybody. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So no, I didn't get to go on my resentment list, right? Because that's where I'm going to look at me. I'm going to look at, people talk about it, as the fourth column, my part, whatever you want to call it. I don't really give a shit. What it is I'm going to look at my selfishness, my self-seeking, my dishonest, my fear, my faults, my character defects. I'm going to look at them with every single person on that resentment list. Are you kidding me? Right? And it wasn't just about incident for incident. It wasn't. It was about, I'm going to look at me as a whole. Right? We're going to take my mom as an example because that woman's crazy, right? But you know what? How was I as a daughter? Right? Would I want to parent me? And I can promise you the answer to that was an emphatic no. No, I would not want to parent me. I stole from my mother. I beat up my mother. I snuck out. I snuck people in. I did drugs. I sold drugs. I drank. I kept drinking alcohol in the house. I disappeared. I left. And then I had brought children into that and then left her with them. I showed up, with a black eye and a lot of stories. I came out of a blackout in Florida. I'm a Massachusetts girl. It's a pretty big road trip, just so you know. There was a lot of things I did to that woman, disregarding what she did. And I'm not saying that's easy, but this is my sobriety. This is my recovery. This is my life. She's had hers. She can continue to do hers. But if I was going to be sober, if I was going to live, I had to look at these things. And my sponsor, again, this is where she was mean to me, as I was to Christy. When it came to like my kids and stuff. And I had to use words like abandon, neglect, abuse. I didn't like those words. But it says we have to get to causes and conditions, and it has to be easy on other people and hard on myself. And so when I use words like I might have, or maybe, she said, no, you did. And I got to do that with all of those people, and it was painful and it was difficult, and I hated every second of it. And then we got to look at fears, and I can promise you I was afraid of everything. For the girl that came in here, not afraid of anything. I was afraid of commitment. I was afraid of being alone. I was afraid of success. I was afraid of failure. I was afraid of financial well-being. I was deathly afraid of poverty. I was afraid of sobriety. I was afraid of relapse. I was afraid of it all. And I got to look at what I was doing, because my self-will, what did my self-will look like in that realm of what was I currently doing that was keeping that fear alive and well? And then God's will, what could I do differently? How could I show up differently? And then I got to look at my conduct, and it doesn't say sex. You know what I mean? It says now about sex. We're going to leave that aside. We're going to look at conduct, right? How was I? Same thing again, right? We're talking selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, fear, right? Did I arouse jealousy, suspicion, bitterness, right? And I got to look at my conduct and who I was and how I was and what I was doing. And then what could I do better? So again, I walked out of this 4-step before I even did my 5th step, because I was told to review what I wrote and make sure it was there, and it was all there. And so before I even went into my 5th step, I had a real clear understanding of the type of ass I was. But I also had some real positives of what I could do differently. And so I went in and I did my 5th step, and I didn't have like this big white light. I walked out. I was exhausted. It was overwhelming. But I had some clear directions from it. And I got to utilize 6 and 7, which again is just looking at my defects and trying to start implementing these new actions, right? Stop being an asshole and start trying to be nice. My sponsor said the easiest way I can tell you is whatever you think, do the opposite. If you want to go left, go right. It's that clear for you. Eventually you'll come around the other side, but for right now. And when you have a brilliant idea, bring an adult, and you do not count. Adult supervision is not your specialty. And 8 and 9, and I thought I got a gift. Like step 8 says become entirely ready, right? And then 9 says we go and do it. But she told me to take that whole list of all of those people that I owed amends to, and just put yes, maybe, and no next to them. Yes is who I'm okay with. Maybe I'm not there yet, and no is a definite, never gonna happen. And she was like, oh, that's okay. So I thought she was giving me a break, but that's what the 8th step says. We become ready. So we start with the yeses, and we pray for the maybes to become yeses, and we pray for the no's to become maybes to become yeses, and we just go out and start. We start where we can, right? And I thought she was crazy, and I didn't want to do that because she told me I couldn't say sorry, that I had to stand before you. And I had to own and be accountable and list what I had done to you. and say that I regret the harm. I didn't get to use maybes, but I had to say when I did this, I regret that. You did not deserve this. And I had to ask those lovely questions of like, is there anything I left out? Because you know what? My mind, I'm missing some really big spots. And then I also had to ask if they, wanted to let me know how it made them feel. And, and I got to do that. I got to make amends with my husband. I got to make amends with my kids. I got to make amends with my family, with, friends and non-friends. I got confronted with things that I didn't know I did. I got confronted with things that I didn't understand the depth of the damage that I had done. I got told no. I got told go screw. I had other people that reciprocated and cleared up their side of the street with me as well. I thought I had been thorough on my steps, but I can promise you that as life has gone on, there's been plenty of times where more has been revealed. I had a job and I worked with a girl and I did one of those, oh my God, I know her. And I called my sponsor during break and we talked about it and I had to, ask her for a few minutes at lunch and clean it up. I had, I just, there's been a lot of opportunity to do that, and then I was held accountable to start sponsoring right away, and not because I was qualified or I knew anything, but what I had was a book, what I had was my experience, and what I had was a sponsor to help me when I didn't know the answer. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to rewrite anything. All I have to have is my book, my experience, and a wealth of a network. I mean, I sponsor somebody that's here today that, my husband is in recovery, hers isn't, and so she was like, well, he's not really accepting of this. What do? I said, call Tammy, because Tammy's husband's not in program. I didn't have her answers, but I gave her somebody else, and they connected, and they were able to help each other with that. My job is not to solve all your problems or be your everything. My job is to share my experience, and then when I don't have it, help you to find somebody with that experience, because there's nobody in these rooms that has not had whatever it is you're going through. Especially if you can name it. My first sponsor told me, listen, if you can name it, somebody else that did it, you just are not that unique, you're not that impressive. Because I thought I was terminally unique, I thought I was so special, right? And so, being able to go out and sponsor other women, being able to participate in their lives, that is the true gift. Watching the light come on in someone else's eyes. Watching somebody else's family reunite. Getting to be a part of it. Casey and I went on a vacation with her mom. It was fun. Casey had to work. Her mom and I, we went and toured San Antonio. We had ourselves a grand time. She's like, are you guys going to let me have fun with you? And we were like, no, we're doing our own thing. Sorry. Right? I get to be a part of people's families, people's lives. Christy's been at my house since we moved here for every holiday, right? Till the point now where she's reestablished her family in a new way, that she's hosting holidays at her house with her family. How beautiful is that? That I got to be a safe, well-lit place for her until she could be a safe, well-lit place for her family. That's what this is. That's what it's about. That's what it's for. I remarried my ex-husband. He just walked in the door. I can promise you that has not been easy. I know that I've been sober for 26 years, and sometimes people will say, oh, it's got to be easy for you because, you have that time. But what I can tell you is that when you're new and life is difficult and it is painful, and you have that initial urge to go through these steps and to work on those character defects. Why? Because life is everywhere, right? But what's really hard is to do it when you're trying not to stay complacent, to keep doing it when life is good, to keep showing up. I see people in these halls that I know have 40 years of sobriety, 30 years of sobriety, and the fact that they're still sitting here participating, putting their hands out, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. Because it is really easy to get complacent and not work on these things. My daughter is home today. She came home for the weekend, and she's at the house. I asked her if she wanted to come, and she's like, no, I've had enough of AA meetings. She grew up in this program. I had her sober. Like, what an amazing thing to have a child that grew up hearing my story, but not living it. What a difference. Because I have 2 children that had to live my story. It's very different. It's very, very different. My oldest son for years would talk about how I was an embarrassment, and his wife would be like, don't say that about your mom, that's not nice. And I said to her, it's okay. He has the right to that, because it's true. I was an embarrassment. Now that doesn't mean that he talks about me today being that way. I got to go to Disney with him and his family and my grandkids. I got to. It was a privilege. It was an honor. It was a blessing. My husband paid, my daughter and I went. We had a great time. Right? I got to spend the whole week with my grandkids. Grandkids that, if I got what I deserved, I would never be allowed to see, just based out of my son's experience with his own mom. This program isn't about just getting sober. Initially, that's what I wanted. But what I have today, what I have is a life that's second to none. What I have is an opportunity and a blessing. And as long as I'm still showing up, as long as I'm willing to continue to raise my hand and put my hand out, I will continue to have those gifts. I will continue to grow. I will continue to receive. Because selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and fear, that is still the root of my trouble. That's where 10 and 11 come into play. And I am so grateful that my sponsor made me start doing those from day one. I even said to her, I was like, excuse me, those are 10, 11, I'm not there yet. She said, well, if God is going to be your answer, you might want to try and start building a relationship with him. And it says that we could be vague, but we won't. And so today, even still today, that's where I start my day. I start my day with God. I try to stay connected with him. I end my day with God. Am I absolutely 100% disciplined with that? Hell no. I don't even set an alarm anymore. I'm terrible. But God is the absolute pinnacle of my world. And this coming from a girl who wanted nothing to do with it. But again, through 12 steps and sponsorship and all of you people, I have been blessed. And so when I came in here and I wanted to punch people for being that grateful alcoholic, that is who I am today. I am absolutely 100% grateful. Grateful for you to ask for me. Grateful for the women I sponsor. Grateful for the great sponsorship and the friendships that I have had in here. And I am even grateful for my husband. He loves when I say stuff like that. He's like, don't make it weird. But I am grateful, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here, and I believe that 100%, because nobody in my life got sober. Nobody in my life did anything different. My dad is still stoned off his ass and 2 heart attacks later, But, God works through people. And so thank you for having me.